let's talk about something that feels like it's straight out of a movie. Imagine a single waterway so important that if it gets shut down, it could throw the entire global economy into chaos. Well, we don't have to imagine it because it's happening right now. It's a question that keeps economists and world leaders up at night. And just recently, that terrifying hypothetical became a reality, putting a massive chunk of the world's energy supply at risk. Get this, 1/5. That's 20% of all the oil the world uses every single day flows through one single narrow waterway. And as we speak, that critical passage is pretty much closed for business. So to really get why this is such a massive deal, we first need to understand why this one little spot on the map holds so much power over all of us. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. You know, if you look at it on a map, it's just this thin little stretch of water between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. But strategically, it's one of the most important maritime passages on the entire planet. Think of it like the world's energy superhighway. It's the main artery pumping oil and gas from giants like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and the UAE out to the rest of the world. Every single day, 1/5 of all oil and a huge amount of natural gas squeeze through here. We're talking nearly 160 huge vessels a day. And on a totally normal day, 80 of those ships are oil and gas tankers. 80. That number, that's the steady, normal pulse of the global economy. And that pulse just stopped. Okay, so what happened? How did this happen? Well, a regional conflict has effectively slammed the door shut on this critical route. And it all happened so fast. On Saturday, U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran kicked off. By Monday, Iran issued a direct threat. They would set on fire any ships trying to pass through. And the response from the shipping world? It was immediate. By Tuesday, traffic had just stopped. Total standstill. I mean, just look at this. This tells you everything you need to know. Remember that baseline? 80 tankers a day? On Monday, after those threats were made, that number dropped to just 2. It's like the world's busiest highway went from rush hour to deserted overnight. The experts are being pretty blunt about it. Dan Pickering over at Pickering Energy Partners put it simply. It's a de facto closure. What that means is, even though there's no official blockade, for all practical purposes, it's closed. The ships are all just sitting there, waiting, because no one is willing to take that risk. And of course, a shutdown like this sends immediate shockwaves through the global markets. Let's break down that economic fallout. Yeah, this chart shows you the reaction perfectly. International oil prices shot up 12% almost instantly. At the same time, natural gas prices, especially in Europe and Asia, just surged. It's basic supply and demand, playing out in real time on a massive scale. So why did everything stop on a dime? Well, it was like a domino effect. First, you have the direct attacks in the region. Then come the military threats from Iran. That makes insurance costs for these ships go through the roof, making it almost impossible to afford a trip. So finally, the shipping companies just had to make a choice. They paused everything to protect their people and their cargo. Now, while this is a huge problem for everyone, there's one region of the world that is feeling this more than any other, and that's Asia. You really got to see this chart to understand the scale of it. A mind-blowing 80% of all the oil and gas that flows through the Strait of Hormuz is headed to one continent, Asia. The industrial powerhouses of the world are incredibly dependent on this one single choke point. And when we look at who the top importers are, it's a who's who of global manufacturing. China, India, Japan, and South Korea. These are economies that are literally fueled by the energy that has now been cut off. Now, okay, there is a small buffer. These countries have strategic energy stockpiles that can last for a few months, but that's just a temporary fix. A prolonged shutdown, that could be absolutely devastating, especially for a country like South Korea, whose markets and tech industry depend so heavily on these specific energy imports. So what happens next? That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? This crisis has put the whole world in a really tough spot, and the potential solutions are just as complicated as the conflict itself. Here's the situation in a nutshell. The strait is closed, which means less oil and gas for everyone, which in turn means prices are going up and inflation could get worse. So what can be done? Well, the U.S. is looking at options like having the Navy escort tankers or offering special government-backed insurance. But let's be real, both of those are incredibly high-stakes moves. And it's so important to remember, this isn't just about oil and gas.
Those 160 ships stuck every day, they include container ships full of electronics and clothes, and massive car carriers. The entire global supply chain is feeling this pinch.
What's happening in the Strait of Hormuz is a massive, flashing warning sign. It's a powerful reminder of just how fragile our interconnected world really is, how the whole system can grind to a halt because of one single point of failure. And it really leaves you with a critical question. What happens when the next one breaks?